Okay, it's time for a big boy. Last Chance for Victory. This is the new Line of Battle game by the Gamers. Line of Battle is basically a replacement for the regimental sub-series of the CWB series. Now, I love the CWB games, and in fact, Gettysburg, Thunder at the Crossroads, sorry about the light there, which I was hoping to do, or I was intending to do, and then broke down and bought this and said, you know what, I want to try this, because I had heard such good things about the LOB. Anyway, it's a similar system. You can see the roots in it, but it ain't the same. And I'm largely set up with what Dean, the designer, essentially calls, I don't know, the legacy or traditional start for Gettysburg. He doesn't think this is terribly valuable, but it's basically the starting on the first day with Heth's initial probes. Now, most Gettysburg games, you know, I should really save this for the scenario itself, because I'm planning on going over the Line of Battle rules and the differences there. So I'm going to hold off on any of that. As well, I'll probably forget anything, you know, about the game type thing. You get a lot of game with this one. It actually comes with 6 maps. I've got a couple of extra maps in here, but 4 maps is the full scenario. There's 2 smaller maps, and you can actually play the whole campaign, the whole Gettysburg battle on those 2 maps, but it's pretty tight in terms of, you know, you don't have a lot of maneuver room, and especially kind of the back areas where you're transiting forces for the Confederates, I suppose, especially, become kind of difficult. You cover a much smaller chunk of the overall land. But most of the combat zones are well, all of the combat area is covered in it. You also get this little mini scenario here, kind of a way to ease into it. I printed this sucker out. This is supposed to be a correction for the map. Maybe it's on the other map. I'm actually not seeing any difference between what's there and what's kind of in the same area on this map. So I didn't really read up on why you need that. Apparently Jason Pipes posted something about it, and I went and hunted it down, printed it out to compare to see how big a deal it would be. You got this special terrain key with the elevation levels listed on it that gives you the indication of the coloring. Now, one thing you immediately see with this, just like with South Mountain, that was the first game where I noticed the change. That's that kind of tannish box there with no name on it on the side. That shouldn't be sitting that way, given that. You notice that the colors have become more muted over time. That happened anyway with Gamers games, but we're starting to get elevation handled with contour lines. I'm not sure how I feel about it overall, but it is much prettier than the old map with kind of some of its garish splash marks and stuff. This whole set of, this is the second edition Line of Battle. I actually have the first edition one. I picked it up at the same time, the None But Heroes. I like to give Gamers games at least one iteration. It's not that the rules are bad in the first iteration. They're usually actually pretty good rules, but a significant amount of you know, little smoothing outs and maybe some corrections, just things that players bring up and say, that doesn't make much sense, usually get implemented very quickly into the system. And in this case, it was the second game in the series. I've kind of missed early iterations with just about everything. I do have, and will maybe have to face, the first iteration of the OCS. I have Guderian's Blitzkrieg kicking around somewhere. All right, I'm kind of trying to avoid the rules, but that's what this is really about. It's to talk about the rules and the differences in the rules between this And, well, CWB, and maybe to a lesser extent RSS, but I've only played one RSS game so far. I'm at kind of a crossroads where there are things that I like from this. Now, I haven't played yet, and I could be fooled in my assessment, because I'll tell you this much. When NBS, Napoleonic Brigade series, which I have some of them kicking in there, Talavera was the most recent one, and that's the one we're talking about here, came up with the, there's Marengo over there. I don't think I have boxes for any of the others. When they came up with, actually I do, Esper Nestle. When they came up with version 2, I was very happy. It seemed more detailed. When they came up with version 3 of the NBS, I said, oh my God, it's taken a lot of the good stuff out of the game. Well, it turned out they made the game a lot more realistic, which I can see this is already doing from the rules. And but they also simplified a lot of things. Lock, stock, and barrel, I play version 3 of NBS when I can. I may show some of the earlier versions on video, but I'm actually considering more converting everything over to version 3, which might require some counter modifications. The question with this is, my initial reaction was the same as it was with NBS, which is, oh boy, they took away all the stuff that I like, and we'll see that as we go, but a number of things have been pulled out of the old system. Now, in some ways, RSS was just too clunky for me, the regimental subsystem. But this feels like it stepped back and abstracted some things that CWB used to do that I really liked. Some of the aspects of the game. But they've also kind of toned down some things from CWB. Maybe things that I like, maybe things that I don't. We shall see. All right. So I'll try to give enough of an overview that you get kind of an idea, even if you're not a CWB RSS fan, but that's where this is going to be largely focused. For that, I should go over, I guess, what is represented on the counters. And you have a lot of different, basically counters are going to be segmented. These are your regular infantry units. They give a strength point factor. The little letter, that's the number. The little letter here is the weapons type, just like in the old Great Battles of the American Civil War. And then over here you have the morale rating. And then you have unit designation, command, hierarchy. That's all very important in here, as much as it is in the old Great Battles of the American Civil War. You're not going to have units flying off on their own, but there's more than that in the command system. The Gamers American Civil War stuff is all very much based on orders. And this continues that tradition, but modifies it somewhat. The map, standard gamer stuff. You don't have hex numbers on every single hex. They kind of jump every 5 hexes. That's usually sufficient. Sometimes it causes problems. Oh, I forgot to go over commanders. Commanders in this are a little different. So each commander is here. They're going to have 2 different numbers on them. The first number is kind of an orders and awareness type command number. The other one is their morale rating. In the old CWB games, you had a single number, and that suffices for most leaders. If you look at many of the leaders here, they have the same value for both, but some of them are significantly different. For example, this guy's not very good at orders, but he's very good at rallying and leading his troops. Backside of counters, well, for the infantry, you have in column. You'll see I have these little specially purposed road column markers. Back in CWB, you used to use little B's or whatever, which you didn't need to use. That's a biggie here. Over in CWB, you had sheets to track all the losses on all the units. And on those sheets, you could track casualties and stragglers. That's been taken away. Now you just have one value, which is going to be the losses that you take, and you mark the current strength of the unit, I guess, or the losses, but I use current strength probably on these things. Now these things suck, in my opinion. They're little 4-valued things. They're like block games in terms of being difficult to manipulate, hard to see what's going on. I may have to just ditch them and switch to pure number counters. But there's a lot of counters needed for this. I certainly have enough over in things like Wellington's Victory, but I don't really know if I want to resort all my numbers. So we'll see how much those piss me off. We have some additional changes here. A new kind of counter called Cowardly Legs. This is going to cover breaking a segment of the line all at once. When you launch an attack, you're going to affect the defender. A few games have tried to cover this, sort of mass collapse on a side, and this is Dean's reaction to it, and it's a fairly simple and elegant one. We'll see how well it actually plays out. It looks decent in the rules. These are going to be your different artillery low ammo markers. Unlike CWB, we no longer have low ammo on regular small arms. That's been taken out. The idea being, hey, you're not focusing as the guy who's shifting the arms. Now, small arms, lack of ammo, had some effect in a lot of battles, small localized areas. It generally seems to fit that well in CWB, but it doesn't have a whole lot of effect on the whole battle. However, artillery ammo has a big effect on battles. There were times when the ammo couldn't get through easily, etc. The old CWB system handled just a track that you drew the ammo from. In a lot of ways, this should work the same, except instead of a track, the ammo is, I believe, carried on the wagons for the actual core. And when you get an out of ammo marker, instead of just marking down how much ammo you've used, it's more abstracted than that. You have to replenish the ammo back from your stock that's with the wagons. And I believe you keep track of 2 different types of ammo, both the canister, which is the backside of these counters, and the shot or shell in some cases. I already talked about the road column marker. Oh, these. So this is a rule we're going to have to get to in some detail because I don't really understand it too much right now. Well, nah, we don't have to get to it in too much detail. Basically, when you do counter battery fire, what that's going to do is suppress the enemy artillery, and it reduces its effectiveness. The enemy can then choose not to fire, and thus, his effectiveness is completely suppressed, or he can fire at a reduced rating based on those counter battery fire markers on him. So that's kind of a neat little solution to a situation because other changes have taken place to make long-range artillery duels less damaging to the infantry standing around. So that's always been something that felt kind of funny, is these long-range plinking with artillery. Didn't really give the right results in CWB. About the ammo, RSS had a very detailed ammo system, which has been pretty much trashed. That's been thrown out for this much more simplified system. I'm perfectly happy with that, I think. We have our morale states. These are the same as in CWB, although their effect is a little different. So, for example, Bloodlust is going to be a little less impressive than it used to be. Shaken and Disordered are about the same. Routed is about the same. That gets us our counters. We have this is the RSS circular turn track. That's basically what you have is all the hours of the day swung around here. You have this little 15-minute track for most turns, but when you get to nighttime, they're going to be 30-minute turns. They might as well be an hour turns, actually, but I guess they want to keep, this way the movement point allowances, etc., stay the same, and they stay in conformance with earlier idea that, hey, nighttime, you do about half as much. Okay. Lots and lots of paper comes with here. This is the scenarios. There's also specific rules for this battle, which is separated from the scenario book, and then a lot of designer notes about Dean's particular view on Gettysburg, because this game is his view on Gettysburg. It is a little different from any other Gettysburg game I've seen. Among other things, I should probably not go into this, but he's very much scripted the beginning of the battle with the idea that you are either Lee or Meade. You're not going to be making some of those first day decisions. You get a decent amount of leeway, but you're not going to be able to do what most Gettysburg games allow you to do, which is, march in with these initial forces over here, brush aside the cav very easily, even if it's decent stuff, or outmaneuver it or something like that, and try to, immediately put pressure on the cemetery and Culp's region very early in the day. But likewise, the Union doesn't just fall back there knowing that they can't really defend against the Confederate position. I've been okay with the other Gettysburg designs. I'm okay with history going off the rails a little bit. This one, though, is going to be interesting because it does try to make that first day play out like the first day did, and I think that's going to be really painful for the Confederates because unlike, I guess, Dean's experience, I've usually felt that Gettysburg and Terrible Swift Sword or Thunder in the Crossroads, the two games that I've really played on the subject, has always kind of been an even fight if you allow both people to play pretty freely. That doesn't feel terribly historical, but that's the way that I feel. Okay. What do we want to go over here? All right, let's go over a little bit more before I take a pause, because I'm going to need to. These slopes, what are they going to do? They have no effect on movement or ground combat. They're going to affect the morale table, the slope lines here. Now, they kind of actually affect movement too, but only when they're in place with these kind of extreme slopes markers here. This inclining ground. Now, that's going to determine how it affects movement is how many different contour lines are in the hex that's inclined. Woods are a little different from most of the games in the series. Basically, Woods hexes cover movement effects of the woods, whereas these little green bars are for line of sight, which to me looks like you have line of sight through the woods here. I'm not absolutely sure of that. We're going to have to look at that a little bit more carefully when we get to it in play. I probably won't touch on that too much in the rules, but that's my impression here. Stone walls, the old system kind of had whoever moved up to the stone wall first kind of owns it. That's not the case anymore. They're basing it on the orders that you have. If you have orders to take the territory or retake it essentially, which is a little harder to remember, then you can't take the wall. You can't have the advantage of the wall. But if you have orders to defend, or if you don't have orders, because they've gotten rid of defensive orders completely, replaced them with other mechanisms that handle the same thing. Defensive orders never quite worked. I liked them better than without, but they had their problems in the old systems. The town is just going to be a mess. I'm used to this in Gettysburg and actually in most battlefields, but there are some games which had a lot of town fighting in them. I'm thinking Baton Rouge here particularly. That would have to have, if you did that with this system, that would have to have its own really specific rules for the town fighting. But most games, the armies just pretty much avoided the towns, and they kind of do that here. I think you're disordered if you're inside the town, and in line formation. You just don't want to be in it. No defensive advantages. It's just bad. It's bad news. Just like in Terrible Swift Sword. A little bit of worrying about road intersections. Basically, if you're following road movement, they try to make it. They try to put some mechanisms in place to prevent you from running two columns by each other on the road. That's not too big a problem if you're using the road movement counters. It becomes pretty clear that you can't do that, but they're kind of an option. We have fighting in the towns, but it's just, you don't want to do it. Creeks and runs. Rock ledges. Damned if I know what these look like. Ugh. We have a chicken bake here. I think that's specific to Gettysburg. Oh, I'm looking for a rock ledge. I'm not seeing it. Maybe they mean these vertical hex sides here. Maybe not. There may not be any on this map. If there were, I'd think they'd be over on the Culps Hill area here. And I see this weird little check mark. I hope that's not it, because I will never see that. I think that's just kind of a part of one of these. Maybe the trail's coming through or something. Yeah, that's the trail coming through there. Okay. Okay. Sequence of play looks very much like CWB's sequence. Oh, there's a concept of smallness. If your unit is 3 strength points or less, it is small. That's going to affect its ability to hold a hex. Basically, you need at least 4 strength points to hold the line in the hex, and your morale is going to be reduced. Some other effects come up by for being small as well, which we'll see. For melee combat and stuff like that, which actually is kind of the same. We have our normal looking sequence of play here for the CWB stuff. You have a command phase where you do orders. There's this attack recovery thing. What that's going to be is if your units have stopped on their attack for some reason, stalled out, they have a possibility of kind of taking up their orders again. Alternatively, they also have to do that to accept new orders. And then fluke stoppage. This is going to replace the old course attack stoppage. Now the stoppage is happening at, I believe, the brigade level. Maybe it's division. Anyway, smaller sized units have their possibility of just, halting on their own. You can recover their forward movement with the attack recovery, though, if you wish. Well, you have to eventually. Activity, movement, and combat are going to be combined here. We don't have a defensive fire and offensive fire phase. Combat's been kind of integrated into movement completely. And we'll see a little bit about that more. And close combat's been heavily modified and simplified. All good on that, I guess. A lot of that simplification, though, takes little bits of the story out. You're not getting, did I beat him on the initial fire, or did he break at this point? And just a lot of those details are being taken away, which is kind of funny because this is, the smaller scale, more detailed stuff. The equivalent of the RSS, you expect more detail added on. Well, they've simplified it and made it kind of a bigger, dumber monster type thing. It's not a big dumb monster. It's still a fairly complex game, I'd say. And then the rally phase, you do what you're going to see is kind of a standard mechanical rally taking place. Counter battery fire comes off, and then so remember, stragglers are gone. Well, you're going to get them back at night now. At midnight every night, what you're going to get is, I think, a quarter of your strength of all your units that have taken losses back. Obviously, that's not going to work over a long period of time, but Dean assures me via the rules, I don't have too much personal correspondence with him except on Facebook. Every now and then I leave him messages, but on his cute pictures. But he assures us that he's able, that over the course of a few days of battle, this works out pretty well. I'm particularly disturbed by it because I like the idea of I throw the unit in, it takes damage, I throw it in. The good units take higher percentages of real casualties and all kind of stuff like that. You kind of don't get that here. The good units end up recovering just as much as the poor units do. And you're losing part of the story there. And that's my fear with it, is that I'm going to just lose too much of it. Okay. Let me pause for a while, and then I'm going to dive into the rules themselves, because I do want to get into a little bit more specifics than I can give. You know, this was kind of a broad overview of a type that I don't even usually do with a game, but I think it's somewhat helpful here. And it's not all that much an overview, but we'll see. Okay, I'm not sure how useful my presentations tend to be. And they're a mixed bag overall, but let's see what we can get here. So, the command phase is going to be basically what happens here is you have to roll to issue an order against kind of an awareness type factor. I'm going to look at the mechanisms in a moment. And you have to make a check when the order arrives at a new leader. Now this is a little different from how the CWB design worked. Let's see if I can work out this. Oh wait, maybe I'm mistaken about that. Maybe the roll is only over here. Let's see if we can find this. We're over in the tens. Okay. So what you do is you write out your order just like you would in CWB, and there's kind of an example of what an order looks like. Now, there's some question that I have about this, whether or not you have to spell out all the subordinate commands immediately, or if they're spelled out, and I think this is the intention, but they left it kind of fuzzy so people could spell everything out right from the beginning. If they're spelled out when a subordinate commander gets this. So for example here, the Army commander writes orders for the First Corps in general. And then subordinate commands for the attack are spelled out, which will have to be received by those specific divisions. And I think commands are only rolled down to the division level unless you make a specific brigade order or something like that. Orders are going to be combined into just two types, attack and move. Movement orders are basically more restricted than they are in the old CWB and RSS, in the sense that you have to actually limber up and form into column to make a move order. There may be some exceptions for very small redeployments. I seem to remember something about that. But in general, if you're doing a main move across the board, the movement part of your order is intended to be a big movement in column, in road column, actually. Well, it doesn't necessarily, if you're not playing with the road column rules, you kind of have to follow it by forming these kind of, he describes it as a conga line. Each unit basically has to be nose to ass with the previous unit. So you're going to be moving bigger formation columns. I think that has to be at least at the brigade level. Everything has to be in its own little columns. You can make, obviously, longer columns if you wish. And then you can have a jumping off point. If it's an attack order in general, what you're going to be doing is you can mark a point where the move part of the order ends. So like these guys could move up to here, deploy, and then say march on Cemetery Hill if Cemetery Hill was held by the Confederates for some reason. What they're actually going to be doing is slipping up the Emmetsburg Pike, cutting through Gettysburg, and deploying themselves where the Cav are right now to take over the defense there. Okay. I'm looking for the process here. Okay. You're allowed, okay. So yeah, you do have to make a command roll with your army leader or whatever to try to make an order. And that's going to be based on your command value, which is the first number. And if you've got you get a bonus if you're making a deployment from a move order, i.e. forming into line at a location. Or if you're trying to send a unit in reserve, which is a new concept in this game from the old situation. Now, when the army commander sends out an order, you have to determine how long it takes for the order to get there. And that's based on the army commander's awareness of the situation. When you write an order, you're actually kind of anticipating because you have a full view of the battlefield. There's no hidden movement rule in this game. You could, of course, try to retrofit the old CWB hidden movement option into this. So this is the number of turns it takes for the army commander to become aware as you are. And then you're going to have to count a distance between the headquarters. Well, let's see what that is. And basically that just adds what? A few points to the overall command. The idea being, look, you know, a single rider can actually move a lot more quickly than some of the movement allowances that are done. Now this is done in hexes though, which means road lines are no longer as effective for communications and they're no longer as effective for command radius. For the communications, it's kind of disturbing. For the command radius, I really do see why it matters because what you could do in the old CWB was basically deploy a command along a road and it had this tremendous frontage that was just ridiculous. Whereas if you tried to deploy the command, you know, in kind of rougher terrain, it couldn't hold anywhere near the frontage that was expected. So that trade-off worked pretty well for me, but I'm not so sure with the command how much it does, but it simplifies the whole issue. You just count a distance for the command radius for the one order going out to the other order, and it'll cost one additional turn if you're within command radius. If you're beyond, it costs 2. If it's 50 hexes or more, it's going to cost 3. I don't know if you really need the beyond the command radius because nothing has a 50 hex command radius. Okay. Then when the order gets to the general who wants it, they make a roll, or who's been assigned it, they make a roll on the command table as well, very simplified compared to what CWB had. And they either take the order up or they don't. They never just throw them away anymore. But it could take a while to get an order, just like, you know, the old delays and stuff. This time, though, you don't know. You know, you don't know that I'm sitting in delay 6, where I need a 1 in 6 chance to get an order. So, I'll try to write him a different order. I'll figure out something new for him to do because it's obvious now, even though I've gotten no feedback from him, that he's reluctant to do this. That allowed, I always felt that that was kind of gamey, what would happen in a CWB game, and I think they've gotten around that with this, along with simplifying the system. Now, if a corps leader gets orders to attack or deploys his column in a multi-part movement attack order to attack, the attack orders themselves have to be propagated down to the divisional leaders. And you follow the same kind of pattern, how long it's going to take to get to him. The corps leader doesn't have to make a roll. He's already presumably accepted his orders from the army commander. So he doesn't have to make another roll to reissue those orders. But the divisional leaders will have to make a roll to accept the attack order. So attacks can end up on the corps basis coming in kind of raggedly. And obviously, if you want to send orders down to individual brigades, you're just making life more complicated for yourself in doing so. Okay. We'll worry a little bit about this sucker here. Any brigade led by a zero command leader, I think this is on the brigade level only. Let me check this, 9.1E. It may be for the whole command though, but that would be weird. Yeah, it's only on the brigade level. And all replacement brigade leaders have this. Is going to have to make a roll every turn when they're about to move to see how much they drag their feet at that point. So brigade leaders having a zero command value can become very problematic, even if they've got a good morale or whatever. And that's one of the neat little additions here, is that, you know, even once you have your command orders and such not, some of your units are going to be poorly commanded, especially if you start taking casualties on your brigade leaders. You want them to influence your morale, you want them up at the front for melee, well, you're going to lose a lot. If you've ever played TSS or any of the, well, if you've played any of these tactical fire combat type Civil War games, you'll notice there's often quite a bit of loss of the brigade leaders. They're usually pretty cheap in terms of victory points, and they give you a big bonus in terms of their morale when they actually attack. However, now you're going to pay a price as to the disintegration of command and control in the organization. And obviously, some of these units have crappy leaders. For example, Geary here. There aren't going to be too many of them, though. Mostly, it's going to be once you take casualties. Let's try to find our way back to anything special here. Jump over movement in combat. There's not. This is really the sequence of play being spelled out here, and I'm going over it. All right. What about the core movement activity phase? Let's take a look at this. Well, maybe we should look at the other things over in the command phase. All right. So attack recovery is going to use this chart here. And basically, if you're in a situation where your attack has stopped for some reason or another, either due to a skedaddle, which is personal choice, or a stoppage, and there may be other things, you have to basically make a roll with some modifiers, the leader command values in here, to see whether or not you get a chance to make another roll based on the leader value. If you succeed in those, if you're in a no orders state, if your orders have been finished, like because of a skedaddle or something along those lines, your recovery means you're eligible to undertake checks for new orders and such. If you're currently under attack orders and you got a stoppage, or you're currently under orders and got a stoppage, you can take up your orders again by succeeding on this two-step process. And that simplifies and actually it makes the recovery of the unit something different from what it used to be. What it used to be was you rolled core attack stoppage, and oh, look, your orders went away. And now somebody had to come up with new orders for the unit. And that really didn't reflect reality. So again, I'm seeing something that I really like in this system, having been baked into it. It makes me unwilling to kind of play the old RSS as is. But there may be some things that I want to carry over from that. I won't do it in this playthrough, but in the long run, I may find that I like my old stragglers, you know, keeping track of that in every case, for example. It may be impossible to do, though, without a lot of work in terms of retrofitting the system. Okay, fluke stoppage. Again, this is something that in the middle of what? Let me make sure I understand this enough. 10.7b. I mean, you know, obviously I don't know the rules as well as someone who's explaining it should, but it's going to help me to explain it on camera, and hopefully until somebody who really knows them does it, this is what you got. Okay, when you're following an attack order, you have to make the fluke stoppage check, which is a reason you don't want to, say, just give an attack order across a long distance, in addition to the fact that if you're moving in column, you might as well have a move order for that part. But you can segment your order to moving to a certain point, deploying, and then converting to an attack order. It's kind of a complex order. Not to be confused with complex orders in CWB, which is something different, right? That is attack. So you're going to make a roll against this fluke stoppage as soon as you have an attack order. And what do you do here? You get penalties for wounded or killed leaders. If you have a reserve, you get a bonus to your fluke stoppage. Your command is less likely to be able to just stop if it's got reserve forces still not committed. Now, there's specifics for how big a reserve you need for any given unit. So I think with a core, you need a whole division in reserve or something like that. I'm not sure. Let me see. We've got the definition here. Okay. No, it's per division that it's done. So a division of 3 or more brigades needs 1 brigade in reserve, 1 full brigade. If you're a small division, you just need, or a brigade command or something like that, you just need a full-strength regiment in reserve to get that bonus. Now, full strength or complete. Complete brigade, I think, that's not terribly well defined. I don't think it means that you need to have no casualties on it. I think it means you need all the units there. And if something's been shot off the board, I would say it can't be a complete brigade anymore. That would qualify. Full strength regiment, though, means you need all the strength points in that regiment. Okay, where are we? Fluke stoppage. So at nighttime, you're more likely to get one. You roll. If you get a 6 or more, you win. You're fine. Otherwise, roll 2 dice below, -1 more at night. And that'll be based on the command leader again, the commander's value, his command rating. Again, for a second check to see if you fail. And in this case, again, you have to get higher than that number in order to succeed, right? Yeah, in order to keep going. Otherwise, you get this fluke stoppage. It doesn't destroy your orders. It just makes it so that you're no longer attacking. And I believe you have to kind of pull back into a safe location that's, you know, specified in the rules, but basically it's out of small arms range. And importantly here, it's out of small arms range. It's not the other guy can't shoot you, which means that you can't just take cover behind other units or behind terrain or something. You have to actually fall back to a location. Okay. I think that's most of what I want to cover here. Putting units into reserve might be a good idea, though, too, to talk about at this point. Problem is no orders like normal. It's a defensive situation. There's some options are surrounding those. Special rules for artillery battalions. Artillery in this game is actually organized under its own little commands for the most part. And they have their own leaders, and largely they operate like regular units do. You've got some ability to post units if you have an artillery leader in specific locations, and then they can kind of continue firing from that location without being directly in a command range. A lot of specifics about that. I should probably go into skedaddles. So you have a choice to skedaddle when you like, or like the old emergency core retreat when you step on somebody's headquarters. If your headquarters is stepped on in this, you're forced to skedaddle. Now, skedaddle isn't as... I'm not sure how devastating it is. The old emergency core retreat threw straggler losses on you and forced you back a specific amount of space. This kind of says you choose how far back you want to throw your headquarters. And once you do that, then the other units have to enter column formation, limbered, mounted, whatever, and move towards the headquarters. And as long as you're in skedaddle mode, you can't leave column. So you've got real problems if you just try to skedaddle close to where you are. You want to make sure, it's your job to make sure you skedaddle someplace safe. I could see that causing some problematic situations where units would rout or whatever, but I think actually the game is probably going to handle that pretty well. Players might be able to do some things that are stupid that would be unrealistic, though. That's the only issue I have. Hey, we haven't talked about initiative either. Initiative is another special thing. Now, initiative used to exist in CWB. You could kind of take it for any commander, and it allowed you to write new orders. It's gotten more restrictive than that. But on the plus side, there's no loose cannon. You're not going to be marching out like was done in Gettysburg and just wander out in the middle of the field. Okay, your limits are to move an artillery command with a move order, modify an existing order as to route or timing but not objective. Gives you some ability to shift defensive orders if you're playing with them. Releasing a reserve is an allowable initiative. And counterattack to recapture terrain lost by another friendly formation. You can always counterattack to take your own terrain back, but if you see a friendly unit being driven back over a key part of your defensive terrain, you could make an initiative roll to try to take that from them. You don't have to go through the full orders thing. And anytime you want to end a skedaddle, you have to make an initiative roll. You stay in skedaddle until you do that. How's an initiative roll done? You make a command roll on the normal table. If successful, you're good. You've got your initiative. It's actually simpler than normal command situations, but it only allows you to do things that mostly you could do without a roll in the old CWB system. Mostly. Maybe not that counterattack. Okay, so a skedaddle does not put you into an attack recovery requirement. I thought it did. I thought that was the mechanism for getting out of skedaddle. I was mistaken. Okay. We were looking for something specific, and damned if I remember what it was. It was not initiative. Damned if I remember. Okay. Well, we could look at command control. That serves some purpose. Basically, like all the games, you have to be within range. The range is in hexes rather than movement points now. The Army command control is just really for the importance of order deliveries, but these others are of some importance if you're not on individual orders to maintain. Let me see. In general, you're free to move it as you like defensively within your command radius. If you're not in command radius, you kind of have to move into it, but you're going to see you're not always allowed to. And I think you're allowed to pass on that moving into it. It's if you move, you must move towards it. So you can hold a position outside of your command radius for a while. What you can't do, though, is you can't fire outside your command radius unless you're adjacent to the enemy. And now small arms fire in this has a range, which we'll, I'm sure, look at later. But that means that opponents can open fire on you. Not sure where my... here's, so you can see we've got different ranges for the different weapons. So there's going to be, you don't want to be sitting out of command trying to defend, because the opponent will just shoot you up there. You won't be allowed to make fire orders. And you are allowed to make move orders, but only if you withdraw. Now, it's important that you're allowed to make fire orders when you're adjacent to someone, because we're going to have locking zones of control in this game, which we'll see in a little bit. I need to take another break. This is going to take forever to do all the rolls, and I want to kind of be fresh most of the time.